Yo guys!
In this video I'm going to challenge 2 other producers to make a track using the same 3 free plugins, and we see if these plugins are even usable or if they're...
With 3 producers, 3 free plugins with Alex,
You heard it. Guests this episode are Alex Reid and Pelennor DSP. The plugins we're going to use are Cherry Audio's Surrealistic MG1 Plus. We're going to use Ample Sounds, Ample Guitar, M2 Lite. And the third plugin we're going to use is Decent Sampler, specifically with the library Lorenzo's Drums. Let's see what Alex Reid did for his production.
Hello everyone, Xantux Soundfactory invited me to participate in this challenge, so I made this track.
That's poppy. Crazy harmony, I love it. Again, the drums sound strong. Good production.
It was really fun and challenging to make, and it gave me the opportunity to produce an idea I had over 10 years ago. So let's start the breakdown. So when we decided to use Ample Guitar to produce a song, I firstly thought it's going to be difficult, because it's an acoustic guitar with some limitations, as for example, you cannot use a pick. So I grabbed my electric guitar and tried to remember how I played that idea, and then I programmed Ample Guitar MIDI to sound like that. And the result was like this. That's for the intro. We go to the verse. And as you can see, for this to work, I needed to edit carefully the velocity. Then the pre-chorus is like this. And finally we go to the chorus. So I started with the guitar because that was the main idea and is the thing driving the melody, the chords, and also a bit of the rhythm. And then I used this nice EQ by Arturia, which gives nice air and nice body to the sound. Next up we have the synths. This was fun to make because we were using this realistic MG1 Plus. It doesn't have options for unison or for choruses. So when you play it alone, it can be a little bit harsh. That's why I'm actually making copies of it, and I have copies in the middle, one copy on the right and one copy on the left. And you can also see that each copy has a different tuning. I'm basically making my own stereo unison effect. same with this other layer. Here I'm using 6 different realistic MG1 Plus. And now I added a little bit of effects to bring up the high energy. The bases are also made with the Surrealistic MG1 Plus. Here I again layer the Surrealistic MG1 Plus to make it wider. This is layered with other bass that I had to bounce again for CPU. And this one is more of a sub, even sounds a little bit like a bass guitar. And as you can see, I'm also saturating the low end to give more life, more harmonics to it, so more presence. So finally we go to the drums. We use this sampler, Lorenzo's drums. And by the way, I separated the kick from the snare, from the cymbals, so I can process them separately. But I had an initial problem with it. I don't like the sound of the snare. That's something with more body. So what I did was to add, first of all, Manta, which is a plugin from Florian Brugrala.
Hello, I'm Florian Brugrala from Beats Basteln.
I hope I pronounced that right. Which is basically a bandpass filter on parallel that's used to add body to percussive elements. And then I use the usual suspects to give more body, aggressiveness, and going extreme, which are an SSL console. As you see, I'm blasting the high end. Then an 1176 style compressor, and again, I'm using a lot of compression. A tape machine just to take care of the peaks. I'm using it as a clipper. This is the before and after. It sounds completely different, almost like another sample. With that ready, I started to process the kick. Finally, for the hi-hats and the cymbals, I'm using the same impulse response as I used on the snare. I put the toms on the same track as the snare. And that's how I did it. I hope you like the sounds we made. Go visit my channel.
That's cool. Very clean production. Love the synth sound design. It feels like, oh, a new part is introduced. And it's always surprising, but always like in the realm of where it makes sense. Thank you very much for your production.
Hi, I'm Chris from the channel Pelennor DSP, and I've really enjoyed being a part of this challenge. Fair warning, my production is a bit more minimalist than usual since I had a laptop crash during the preparation phase, but regardless of that, let's dive in. So my goal for this production was to use the 3 featured plugins for basically every sound, and there was only one track not using one of the 3 featured plugins for this one. I started the production in my usual fashion of using Scalar to pick out a chord progression. So once I had my chord progressions MIDI, I started working on the rhythm guitar. I set Scalar to humanize both velocity and timing, and output MIDI from a few strum sequences that sounded good. Now, I could have also used the Ample built-in strummer to do this, but I'm not familiar with how it works, so I took the relatively lazy way out of just using Scalar. I then added some saturation using Meld M Saturator, and a delay using the Reaper inbuilt rear delay. That made it sound like this. Next up was the lead guitar, again using Ample M Lite. Because I was planning to use both the lead and a rhythm track, I hard panned the rhythm right so I could hard pan the lead left. To build the guitar melody, I took a copy of the 7th version of the chord progression and just chopped it up until I made something that sounded good. I used two Khan plugins. Firstly, a tape saturation one, and an exciter just to help the lead guitar cut through the mix a little bit more. So when it came to drums, I used the MT Power Drum Kit built-in grooves to build a simple MIDI loop. I then copied that loop onto a track with Decent Sampler and Lorenzo's drums loaded into it. Now, as far as I'm aware, Decent Sampler doesn't support multi-out, so I did a workaround to get individual drum tracks stems for processing. In Reaper terminology, I exploded the MIDI into one note per track, so each track corresponds to one of the MIDI notes. Then I soloed one of each of those tracks at a time and rendered the drum bus. In terms of processing, I did what I do for most drums, parallel compression on both the entire bus and on a sort of send, sort of crush sort of bus, and a couple of Air Windows plugins on the kick so it wasn't so buried. So for the rest of the tracks, except one, I used the Cherry MG1 synth. Fair warning, I'm a preset jockey rather than a sound designer when it comes to using synths, unlike others in this challenge.
Hello everyone!
So for the bass track, I generated a bass part from Scalar, then selected the bow bass preset in MG1. For the ARP track, I started with the Reid EP patch. Then I added the Air Windows Starchild 2 plugin to add a kind of delay sort of ambience, rear comp to duck it down under the lead guitar, and then I used Danksagung GEQ to increase the volume of it in the sides and pull it down in the center. Finally, to create a pad sound, since the MG1's monophonic, I used 3 instances and used each one for the top, middle, and lowest note of the chord progression, respectively. Used the Fluty preset. To soften the sound and make it more mellow, I added Air Windows Chorus Ensemble. Then I followed that with Melda M Vibrato. So once I put all that together and did some mixing and a rudimentary mastering, this is how the track sounded.
The drums sound pretty good. Like, you really transformed how they sound. It's very cool. I like the arrangement, like interesting new elements are added. Very spacious, like many elements, but it was always very easy to pick out the individual elements in the mix. Cool, thank you very much. This one I found to be the most challenging so far. Again, I needed multiple attempts. In the first few attempts, I really struggled to use especially the ample guitar. And still I'm not quite happy with some of the mixing decisions. So I thought this was like a regular steel string. And if I ever needed the steel string, I can use this one. But honestly, I struggled quite a lot. And only when I used some additional plugins like this M Vibrato, I really got inspired by the sound of it. But I didn't really want it to sound like, oh, you need paid plugins to make this free plugin useful. That's not really the case. It's just start throwing some creative things on there. I also used this free plugin called Turbo Paco. I used it as a reverb. It also can do some chorus stuff. And I used an EQ wider, which is free. I guess I used this to tame some of the lower resonance. And this is how my most important guitar pattern of this production ended up sounding. Just as a comparison, this is how it would sound dry. Yeah, so put a rotary speaker on your acoustic guitars. It's a cool effect. And because I wanted to really put that acoustic guitar in focus, I also did a little solo with it. But don't be fooled, because I tell you, if this is dry, it like has a completely different vibe. So no effects, it sounds like this. That's not it for me, but if we add back in the effects, I used the same rotary, I used the reamp, again the reverb just a bit longer. I took out quite a lot of the high end to make it sound a bit more like a nylon instead of a steel string. So if you take out this whole EQ, it sounds distinctive like a steel string guitar, but if I add in this EQ, I take out a lot of the high end, give it some more mid resonance. I think it gets a bit more ambiguous whether this is actually a steel string or maybe even a nylon. I like that. Lorenzo's drums. Which I found quite good for psychedelic stuff. This is the direction I went in. Slight EQ and slight compression. Some room reverb. I think that's maybe the most interesting part of this. And yeah, the snare gets a bit harder later on. And I started out using the Surrealistic MG1 by Cherry Audio just as a bass. And then I also start fading in this pad. It ends up sounding like this. Many of these patches I find a bit bright, so I ended up turning down the filter on a lot of them. The structure so far is we have this very minimalistic first section, then we have this guitar solo, and then we have a verse with some singing. And an interesting thing I do there is I start panning the guitar to the left and I introduce this organ to the right. We make some space for the organ by panning the guitar to one side and the organ comes in on the other side. And then you can still have your bass and drums in the middle and as well as the vocals in the middle. And now we have a little MG1 solo. With Nell as a vibrato on there. The reverb again is Turbo Paco. Yeah, I mean, it's a pretty basic production. And then I got a bit bored and I introduced some more instruments like this Rhodes Mark II library, which is free for full contact. I also introduced some Philharmonic 2 stuff because I wanted to use that. And they just gave it away for free, so. As well as this free ample bass. And then there's just a little guitar solo outro. Yeah, as I said, this one isn't that interesting. I think it's okay. Not my favorite one. Maybe you want to check out the other 3 free plugin songs I made so far on my Bandcamp and compare these and tell me what you think of this one in comparison with the other ones. Let's call this done. There's something you have to do sometimes. Just call things done and move on to the next thing. Maybe this was never meant to be a masterpiece. This is what I came up with. All right, let's listen to the full track. Yeah, that's the song. Yeah, maybe the vocals could be a bit louder, but it's kind of on purpose that they're like a bit quiet and they can't really get through the music. I really like the 2 solo sections. As I said, we call this one done. I think it's okay. Let me know what you think. Also, let us know what you thought of the other 2 productions, of course. Thank you very much for watching. Subscribe if you liked the video. Subscribe to Alex Reid. Subscribe to Pelennor DSP. Check out this track and all my other tracks I made for videos like this on Bandcamp. That's it. Bye.
So we'll see you again, and bye-bye.
Now, having heard the other 2 productions, I think we all struggled most with the ample guitar. These 2 other producers, they used the drums in a more interesting way than me. They really got those drums to sound nice in the track context, and I basically just made a track that fit the drum sound, how it naturally sounded. I struggled a bit using that one too, actually. And yeah, the synth MG1, definitely usable. A bit weird how you switch it from monophonic to polyphonic. It took me a bit to figure out how to use it in a smart way. I think we all managed to, work with it. It's definitely something you can work with.